Hello, and be welcome to the world of darkness. Long ago was it that the sin of Cain spawned the cursed horror that stalks the street at night in search of living blood. The kindred have long been a secret influence through all ages of human history, plotting against one another in a never-ending jihad. Their immortal progeny are among us to this day, hidden from the eyes of humanity by an elaborate masquerade.
Arriving at the Chelsea Botanical Gardens, Elizabeth is seeking a Toreador. A Toreador who seems to be quite the important person. So, naturally, she wants to come across as absolutely pristine as possible. She walks up, stepping out of her her carriage rather, wearing the fanciest burgundy gown she owns. Fine, large, poofy red sleeves flowing down, a black vest in the center with black buttons going down, all velvet naturally. A hat on as ever usual, a veil covering her eyes. In her hand, of course, is her cane, the cobra head glimmering in the moonlight as she picks it up and grasps it on top. She looks back over her shoulder at Nathaniel, giving him a nod, and then turns to go seek the Toreador.
Arriving at the Chelsea Physic Garden, it is a sweeping place, though not by comparison in some of the more royal gardens, which are around the palace, the royal hospital. Nevertheless, the Chelsea Physic Garden occupies and stretches along 4 city blocks, right on the River Thames, with statues already dedicated to gentlemen long past. One stood in the very center of the garden's cobbled path of red brick, lined on either side with long beds of seasonal flowers, the trees swaying in a silent dance. Much of the garden is dedicated purely to medicinal flowers and plant study. So she does find her fair share of the academic type. The benches by now of some old stone have given to age, greening a bit, as has the fountain just to the left as she walks into the gardens, inside of which several small species of fish swim. Though at her approach they scatter, flailing in the water before looking for a place away from her. Around it, a large plethora of plants provide unique aromas, each sickeningly sweet, lingering in the nostril. More accustomed to the decorative plants of many places, the medicinal ones have a distinctive smell which gives the place an entirely unique aroma. Not far away there is a sizable stone wall with potted plants on the edges of some old building, now lost save for the outcropping line, and stood there, with cane head held in both hands, looking down into the water, where the fish scurry, is whom she presumes to be Alexander Charnock of Clan Toreador.
Elizabeth, seeing the long blonde hair, this 6-foot-tall man, is going to walk up beside him and eventually stop and stare into the water with him. She seems to keep her cane in one hand off to the side, leaning some of her weight on it. Her gaze does not flick from the water. She seems entirely enraptured by it, its spiraling, its constant motion. The River Thames is so beautiful at this time of night. Absolutely enrapturing.
They both stare in a moment of silence, he seeming to be just as content as her to do nothing. It takes a few moments before the silence is finally broken, with the entreaty of a voice. She may very well notice that his head has cocked ever so slightly to the side, like a bird's, his singular eye peering out, captured by some of the nearby gaslight as the fog wisps around their ankles. "I presume that you're Miss Grey."
Elizabeth glances up, catching his gaze at the corner of hers before turning her head fully to him. "You presume correctly. I suppose you might be Charnock?"
You would be correct. He pulls away from the fountain, tapping with his cane as he moves behind and past her towards the center of the garden. I feel like walking. If you wish to speak, you're going to have to keep up.
Elizabeth pushes herself off of her cane and turns to face Charnock more fully now. You read my mind. She walks side by side with him, head down slightly, focusing on the bricks but occasionally looking back up to make conversation.
He turns southward, heading now through an overcropping of trees which loom over the pathway, flanked by the many medicinal and decorative flowers and plants, heading towards the embankment as he strides slowly. I hope you had a reason to speak with me, and not just an admirer of my good looks. Otherwise, this is going to be a very indulgent conversation for me.
It just so happens that I do have a topic one might call unique. She looks around to her left, to her right, spotting the academic types, and lowers her voice. Why don't we find some place a little bit more quiet? I'm seeing a lot of academic types who might prick up ears when certain words are played on the field.
You have nothing to fear. They're not paying attention to us. He looks over at them, pointing with the head of his cane. The most you have to worry about them is if they happen to notice you're a woman. They all seem the lonely sort. I always feel like the etiquette of a ballroom should apply as a general practice, at least in regards to men who know how to dance yet refuse to do so. Just abstain from showing. Similarly, if a man can't speak to a woman yet insists on wanting to do so, he should just continue to abstain. He moves towards her, waving the head of his cane under her chin. So start talking.
Elizabeth looks down to the cane, her eyes focusing on its head, before looking back up to him. There is a certain issue which has been wreaking havoc across northern London.
He throws up his hand as if tossing something over his right shoulder, discarding it instantly. I'm unpreoccupied with the issues of London.
Elizabeth hides her bewilderment at this absolutely foul statement and keeps up with the same tone. And what of the culture that might be ruined from these issues taking hold?
Madam, I've spent my entire life in London. I'm a Hullite, who then was embraced in the region of Leeds. I spent a good bit of my own life. As someone who's been kindred for nearly 2 centuries, I've experienced more English culture than you've ever known. Why do you think I'm looking abroad? As every young kindred should. Find something for yourself, something that reminds you of home, yet is exotic enough to keep life fresh.
You might know the old cultures, the past and present, but what about the future? Culture is a never-ending, changing thing. As time moves on, so does its people, and those people therefore move on with their culture. Limehouse is no different with its influx of Chinese.
Charnock interrupts her, laughing outrageously as his cane head rests on his wrist as his hands clasp together. Ah, a Malkavian and a poet. My, what a rare occasion. Tell me if you can name this place. Then, since you are so inclined to appeal to my cultural nature, he poses himself with one hand on hip holding the cane, the other outstretched, his palm preaching, pleading to the heavens. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools that way of dusty death. Out, out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow. He rests his cane on the ground, clasping it with both hands.
I'm gonna try and guess what that is.
Intelligence and academics. It is Macbeth. Spoken by Macbeth himself, in fact. So keen is her memory for such a thing that she can remember how the rest of it goes, if she really wanted.
The moment he stops, she will look up to him, a smile on her face, and she will recite the rest of the verse with her cane flowing about, as though she's lecturing to a university class. She raises her cane up ever so slightly, and a hand placed on her chin before finally bringing it out to the night sky. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Macbeth.
He claps quickly with fingers in hand. Very good. Seems you are actually culturally aware, not just appealing to my better nature. Well, you haven't bored me. I'll hear of Limehouse. It's one of the few places in the city I frequent. He rolls his wrist as he motions for you to continue, his gaze sweeping down and under the brim of his hat as he peruses the sight of the academics near.
Elizabeth, with his full attention now caught, rests both of her hands on her cane, facing him fully, shoulders squared. Those in Limehouse have been experiencing a bit of an issue with the Setites. They seem to lurk in the shadows, dealing opium and other goods to them, bringing down their burden of culture and destroying it into nothing. They are turning it into nothing more than a hapless heads of grass in a sea of dead trees. While there is growth, it will not last long, especially with them, the snakes, the serpents, stealing all the food.
He musters the energy to sigh, pausing for a moment. A bird falls from its nest only to rot away. As time passes, the feathers turn to lines, and the lost tissue shows, turning to ash as dead things should, until the world becomes bones. He looks back to her now. After holding his chin for a moment, on which his fingers straddle, he splays his hand. Decay. That is all the Setites are. Decay. And you come to me rather than Nathaniel Simmons or Cyril Masters because of what? Because I happen to frequent Limehouse. Well, I'll have you know I frequent Chinatown. The rest of the neighborhood. He throws up a hand. I really couldn't give a damn.
Elizabeth raises a hand, an index finger pointed up before she tips it down to him. It just so happens that Chinatown is very place these, as you put it, decay, bare their claws, and sink them deep. See, they are, well...
He clacks the bottom of his cane against the stones, twisting and grinding his hand on the top so it twists the cane into the spot. One or two of the academically minded look over. Glancing at them, he motions as though to shoo them. They look away disinterested, or offended. He doesn't really seem to care, before he looks back at her, listening still, a bemused look in his eye, as though he would attempt to bewitch her.
Elizabeth raises an eyebrow and glances in the direction of the retreating scholars before flicking back to him. She will not have this minor inconvenience deflect her entire speech. This decay, this vampiric presence, in more than just one sense, it's only a matter of time before the rattlesnakes bare their tails and start going elsewhere, making new dens. It's not only in Limehouse, not only in Chinatown, in which they make their homes. There's something that caused chaos all throughout northern London, and no one, not even Nathaniel Simmons, not Halesworth, not Parr, have noticed, and if they have, they haven't done a damn thing about it. Places far north as Hansbury and as far south as Galston Street have seen their ilk. The George Art Building, 3 blocks north, is where one such moor has been caused. It's not only in Chinatown that they wreak their havoc, and unfortunately I cannot be in every place at once. So I come to you, she says, gesturing her hand out to him. Seeking not only your help, she pulls her hand in, raises her finger up, and then points it at him again, but your expertise. For a fool does not pay attention to the rock flying behind him. Instead, they're too busy, focused on the shield running towards them.
Curling his lip, he shakes his head bitterly, muttering under his breath something which rhymes. But he doesn't feel the need to share with her, at least not so much so that she can clearly hear it. I'm not interested in Setites. However, I would be willing to make some inquiries and allow you to know what I find.
She clutches her hand into a fist and raises it to her chin. That is all I could ask for. Anything else is a gift.
I'm not usually in the habit of gift-giving, he taps his cane, thinking. He looks back at her. Might I ask what's your interest in the Setites? I've already agreed to help you. You might as well indulge my curiosity. He begins walking again, continuing south to the embankment.
She'll follow along, making sure that she stays relatively close to him. My interest is one of particularly personal matters, to be honest. Someone I once loved has been taken away from me, and I wish to avenge them. It just so happens these very serpents were the ones to do it.
Love. That's what they should call us. Not vampires. Love. Nothing ensnares you so much as a vampire. Nothing captivates so much as love. We're really one and the same. They ache for kisses, and how often they are so deadly. Who was it that you loved? A husband? I really hope not, for the poor fool's sake. Marriage has a horrible way of killing love, or even the illusion of it.
Elizabeth looks down to the bricks, avoiding eye contact before looking back up. The person I loved is far beyond marriage, a bond which cannot be separated by any means that, for it is one of blood.
Ah, so family. Very well, I can respect that. Love like a mother's can never be without. There really should be more mothers' love in the world. Fathers, too. They get a bad rap. Always busy working and providing, and then made the villain whenever the child acts up. Really should give more credit to fathers. But I see the point that you make. Family is everything. Family is blood. You don't really help my point when I say that love and vampires really should be called the same thing. Reaching down, he plucks a flower as he walks by, smelling it before crushing it in his palm and tossing the leaves, wriggling his fingers, freeing them of the leaves sticking to his hand. As he stops at the embankment, he rests one hand, the free one, on the railing, looking out over the Thames. Well, you've convinced me. It was a harsh negotiation, but you managed through. He points at her. Congratulations.
With just the same amount of sardonic sarcasm, she gives a smile and a mock bow. Thank you. Why, thank you, she says as she looks up.
You didn't tell me before. Your sire. Who are they?
Just like a snake getting defensive, she stands straight up. Not immediately, but straight up enough to where there's enough of a buzz. Her hand is gripping her cane ever so slightly tighter now. They are a man who shall not be named, she says with a solid amount of venom.
Ah, bad relationships. I understand. You don't need to explain. My sire and I aren't as close as we could be either. Is yours still in London? He pauses. England?
Elizabeth looks out to the shore and grabs the railing. I haven't the faintest idea. She motions out to the river rushing by. All I know is that there's someone within the very bounds of the British Empire. I wouldn't have it any other way. She brings her hand back and looks over to Charnock again.
Well, still closer. Not that it seems to count for much. And only physically. You're very strange, Malkavian Miss Grey, and I've met my share of your clan. So many of the Malkavians here in London are so full of humdrum, so serious, so preoccupied with politics or this and that. You're an appreciator of the arts, I can respect that. Tell me, why stay in London?
Well, in my opinion, politics are the arts of the ill-minded. The arts are actual arts, are what keep the lifeblood flowing, even in undead forms. We are much more connected than we once were with the arts, for we have centuries, millennia if we're lucky, to build up and maintain our pursuits of the arts. It would be an absolute droll to squander our potential over years and years of neglect for humans to get nearly as much time as we.
And where does religion come in?
Religion is an art of its own. With some, it allows them to paint pictures of what they wish to see. Others, it allows them to use their words and binds people to false pretenses. Either way, somebody is manipulating a brush on a broader canvas.
I couldn't agree more.
But you ask why I'm in London. It's simple, really. This is where all art goes to die, and I wish to see it before it goes.
And there you've lost me. He stares at the Thames. England is a lovely place. Scotland and Wales have their own charms. Everywhere in the world has its charms. England has culture. London is the seat of England. If you know the spirit of London, you know the spirit of the British Empire. You know the spirit of British men. You know the ways of British women. I love London. I love England. I'm just bored. And I'm bored of not having something of my own. So you and I disagree on that fundamental principle. Art doesn't come to London to die. It comes to London to become a part of London, and then breed new art. Just because Handel and Vivaldi comes to London doesn't mean that their art dies. It means it becomes a part of the culture, and that flourishes into something new, and that's beautiful. Ars veritis artis, art for art's sake. But don't mind me. I'm not a toreador who's particularly fancy with a particular style. If anything, I'm more preoccupied with ships and what's on them than I am worried about what's hanging in the Louvre in Paris.
A collector, I presume?
No, a merchant. One who's very good at what he does. A barterer, a scoundrel, a seducer, a snake. Really just depends on where in the world I am. Right now, just a vagabond. He tosses up his cane and catches it, wriggling it in his hands. One with very good taste.
Elizabeth pushes herself away from the railing, leaning on a cane, and looks up to him. Now that, Mr. Charnock, is something we can both agree on.
Where am I to find you when I know what I find in Chinatown?
Elizabeth motions around as she speaks. I would usually say a place like this, but she stops and looks back up to him. I get a sense that it might be a little boring now.
No. From the smelling of coal in your hair and the 5 steps from Black Lung you would be if you were already mortal, I can tell you come from the East End. You've traveled a good ways to get to me. And I have no interest in going to the East End, so let's pick somewhere in the middle.
Elizabeth raises a hand to her chin, taps it twice before snapping her fingers, a light bulb metaphorically going off over her head. How might the Victoria Embankment Gardens work for you?
No, I've seen my share of gardens for now. Let's meet in Leicester Square in 4 nights. There's a recital I'll be going to not far from there. It'll be convenient for me, and it's a place of art and culture. Maybe you can find something to entertain yourself with.
She thinks for a moment, putting her hand to her chin, before shrugging. Very well, Leicester Square it is.
He pulls his pocket watch out to look at the time. The bedeckled brass and gold catching the light of the moon coming off of the River Thames as he stares into it before he snaps it close. Well, I think you've had more than enough of my time.
May you have an exciting evening, Mr. Charnock. I can't bear the thought of keeping you any longer.
Heavens forbid, I'm saving the excitement for after I get off a boat. I hope to have a pleasant evening. Keep the excitement for yourself. Sounds like you'll be needing it.
All the same, all the same. And with that, she'll give a nod and start walking away, back to her carriage.
And with that, end scene.